In 2025, the Vatican attended the birth of a new era, led by a pope who did not fear confronting the shadows of the past and the winds of modernity. Pope Leo XIV, a pontiff of unshakable firmness, began a process of reforms that shaken the structures of the Catholic Church irrevocably. In less than a year, he implemented drastic changes that challenged centuries of tradition and the growing pressure of society. With a look at the purity of faith, he made decisions that no one would dare, from the prohibition of blessings to homosexual unions to the public excommunication of corrupt clerics, to unpopular measures such as the sale of the Vatican's sacred treasures and the prohibition of digital confessions. Each of these actions was not just an administrative reform, but a scream for a church more faithful to its foundations, farther from external influences, and more committed to eternal truth. In times of polarization and apathy, Leo XIII rose as a leader determined to restore the dignity of the Church, even if it cost popularity or consensus. This is the account of the 10 reforms that not only marked the beginning of a new papacy, but have forever changed the course of the Catholic Church, from the inside out. Get ready for a story of courage, resistance, and transformation. If you got here, know that it was no coincidence. The Spirit brought us to this moment to reflect on the true direction of our faith, seeking no longer to follow the ways of the world, but the eternal truths that guide us. Share in the comments from where you are watching this video. It's not just a comment, but a way to show that even separated by continents, we are united by the same faith. Before following with content, subscribe to the channel for more stories that challenge, illuminate, and connect us. Together, let's explore transformations that call us to reflect and act. Now let me take you back to the moment you have changed. One of Pope Leo XIV's first shallow actions was his clear position against the inclusion of homosexual unions in church liturgies and blessings. With a decree issued at the beginning of his pontificate, the Pope stated that the Catholic Church could not, under any circumstances, bless or accept these unions within his sacred liturgy. This decision, made in a moment of growing acceptance of LGBTQIA+ questions in various parts of the world, generated immediate reactions. For Leo XIV, the doctrine of the Church should not be changed to align with the cultural or political trends of society. He stated that the Church should be an eternal beacon and not give in to pressure by an adaptation that compromises the fundamental teachings of Christianity. The Pope has not seen the measure as an exclusion, but as an affirmation of the unchanging truth of Catholic doctrine. A few days after the first decree on homosexual unions, Leo XIV was even firmer, issuing a new order that directly affected ecclesiastical leadership. Any preacher or clergyman who publicly supported the LGBTQIA+ lifestyle or same-sex marriage would be indefinitely suspended from his duties. Pope Leo XIV believed that the Church could not allow itself to be an institution that could relativize the truth in favor of popularity or social acceptance. His action reflected his conviction that church leaders should be the first to live and preach according to the doctrine, without giving in to external pressure. The measure caused great division, with many condemning the severity of the decision, while others saw it as necessary to maintain the integrity and coherence of the Catholic message. For the Pope, it was essential that the Church remained true to the truth, regardless of external repercussions. On June 19, 2025, one of the most rigorous and widely discussed reforms was implemented by Leo XIV. All church cardinals and princes were forced to sign an annual statement confirming that they were living according to the doctrine of celibacy. The measure aimed to reinforce the purity of life of religious leaders, with a system of anonymous complaints that allowed any member of the Church to report violations of this rule. Leo XIV saw celibacy not only as an external discipline, but as a deep and intimate commitment to God. For him, church leaders should be living examples of virtue, and the violation of celibacy by members of the clergy represented a break with the witness of holiness that the Church should offer to the world. This reform was seen by many as a return to the true spirit of the early Church, where celibacy was a matter of faithfulness to Christ. Pope Leo XIV's attitude towards corruption within the Church was radical and unprecedented. On June 21, 2025, he published a list of high-ranking clerics that had been found guilty of sexual abuse and other immoral behaviors. For the first time, names of bishops and cardinals involved in scandals were exposed publicly, and all were immediately excommunicated. This measure was not only a disciplinary action, but also a gesture of transparency and justice that the Church had avoided for decades. Leo XIV believed that the Church could no longer hide behind titles and status to protect the culprits. By publicly exposing the names and failures of clerics, the Pope sought to restore the credibility of the Church and show that the Church of Christ would no longer tolerate impunity and corruption in his own ranks. This decisive act marked a new age of responsibility and transparency in the Vatican. In an increasingly digitized era, the Catholic Church has been faced with a dilemma: the possibility of online confessions through digital applications or platforms. However, Pope Leo XIV decided in June 2025 that such practices were unacceptable within the Catholic tradition. He categorically prohibited digital confessions, reaffirming that sin's acquittal should be a personal and face-to-face experience. For the Pope, confession should not be treated as a simple mechanical or virtual act, but as a deep and transforming encounter between the penitent and the priest, reflecting the gravity and spirituality of the moment. This gesture of excessive digitization resistance revealed the commitment of Leo XIV to the preservation of traditional church practices, which seek more genuine and human contact with faith. In promoting this measure, he encouraged the faithful to return to the churches, seeking forgiveness directly before God and the minister of the Church. One of Pope Leo XIV's most symbolic and bold reforms was his decision to sell part of the Vatican's vast treasures, which were kept in rare and precious collections. On June 20, 2025, the Pope ordered these riches, largely kept in secret, to be sold, and the resulting funds were directed to the most needy. The Pope believed that the Church should not be a rich and distant institution from the poverty of the faithful, but a true representation of Christ's humility. This measure, which challenged the tradition of accumulating sacred goods, aimed at above all to transform the Church into an example of true and generous charity. Leo XIV believed that material wealth should not be an obstacle to the testimony of the Christian faith, and that the Church, as a body of Christ, should share its goods with the poorest and vulnerable, fulfilling the mission of helping the needy in a tangible way. On June 26, 2025, Leo XIII launched an order that caused great shock within the clergy. No bishop, cardinal, or prince of the Church could more luxury. The measure was clear and direct. If a clergy member had luxury cars, mansions, or private properties of high value, he should sell them immediately. Otherwise, it would lose its position within the Church. For the Pope, material wealth and the symbols of power had no place in the life of those who should serve others. The Church, according to Leo XIV, needed to return to humility, and Church leaders should be living examples of simplicity and detachment. This action not only affected the external behavior of the Church, but also aimed to restore the credibility of the institution, showing that the true Christian leadership occurs through service and dedication, not ostentation. The Pope stressed that those who did not follow this reform would somehow be distant from the example of Christ. One of Pope Leo XIV's most innovative and progressive reforms took place in 2025, when he granted women the right to vote in the Vatican Senate, a historical change that represented a significant opening in the Church. Prior to this decision, women, although present in the discussions, could not actively participate in the important decisions about the Church's liturgy, doctrine, and policies. Now, with the right to vote, women have had an active voice on crucial matters, including the choice of leaders and the formulation of policies that impact millions of Catholics around the world. This movement was a recognition of the central role of women in the life of the Church and a response to the growing demands for more equality and inclusion. Although the change was not unanimously received, it represented an important step towards modernization and recognition of women in hierarchy and ecclesiastical decisions. On June 27, 2025, Pope Leo XIV made an important and emblematic statement, extending a gesture of reception to the LGBTQIA+ Catholic community. He reaffirmed that all the faithful, regardless of their sexual orientation, would be welcome in the Church and could participate in Mass and community life. However, the Pope was clear about the limits of this inclusion. Although LGBTQIA+ Catholics were invited to join the community of faith, the Church would not bless same-sex unions or allow LGBTQIA+ individuals to assume leadership positions or receive sacraments such as marriage. The message was a mixture of welcome and clarity, and Leo XIV expressed that the Church should be a space of welcome and compassion without compromising the fundamental doctrinal principles. For many, this decision represented a significant advance in the recognition of the dignity of LGBTQIA+ individuals within the Church, but for others, the full acceptance was still lacking. Pope Leo XIV's symbolic gesture by refusing to use the traditional papal ring, the fisherman's ring, surprised the world. Since the beginning of his pontificate, the Pope was seen without the ring that for centuries symbolized papal authority. When asked about his absence, Leo XIV explained that he was not ready to use it, for true authority is not in external symbols or a play of jewelry, but in the purity of the mission of serving God and the Church. For him, the ring represented not a symbol of power, but of service and humility, and he would only use it when he was completely ready to fully live this vocation, to serve with total dedication and without search for prestige or recognition. This act of refusal was interpreted by many as a critique of excessive ostentation and hierarchy within the Church, and a reaffirmation that the true papal authority lies in living according to the principles of Christ. In a moment of great tension within the Church, Pope Leo XIV gave a sermon on the true virtue and power of silence. He stated that to speak of virtue it was necessary to live it first, and that silence should not be confused with weakness, but with a deep force that allows reflection and true inner transformation. The Pope stressed that in a world that values both words and discourse, often the true transformation occurs in times of silent introspection and prayer. Leo XIV argued that the Church should thus rescue the practice of silence in her liturgical life, her teachings, and the clergy testimony. This discourse reflected its commitment to humility and authenticity, as well as the need to ward off the Church from the temptation to align with the noise and the demands of modern culture, which often divert to the true Christian mission. With the advancement of technology, several proposals have emerged to facilitate the practice of faith virtually, including the possibility of digital confessions. However, Pope Leo XIV, in his search to maintain the authenticity of religious experience, ordered digital confessions to be prohibited. For him, confession should be a moment of true reconciliation, where the penitent could look into the priest's eyes and, through this physical encounter, feel the presence of God. The Pope emphasized that the experience of forgiveness and grace could not be reduced to a mechanical or virtual process. This movement was seen by many as a return to tradition and the fundamental values of the Church. By prohibiting digital confessions, Leo XIII reaffirmed the importance of genuine human contact, a real encounter between human and divine, far from the coldness of digital interactions, which can obscure the depth of spiritual experience. Pope Leo XIV positioned himself firmly against what he considered the corrosive influences of modernism within the Church. He believed that the Church should not give in to the pressures of adapting its teachings to popular culture or the passing fashions of society. For him, the truth of the Christian faith was eternal and unchanging, and the mission of the Church was to transmit it without modifications, no matter how strong cultural or political pressure. The Pope stated that the Church did not need to imitate the world to be relevant, and that the truth was not something that could be adjusted according to social trends. With this, he made it clear that the Catholic doctrine should remain firm, without concessions, even in the face of the growing acceptance of progressive ideas in various parts of the world. For Leo XIV, the true mission of the Church was to be light in a world of darkness, not bowing to cultural conveniences, but being an unchanging real lighthouse. Pope Leo XIV began his papacy being seen by many as a soft and conciliatory figure, someone who could soften the contours of a crisis church. However, throughout his pontificate, he proved to be a radical reformer, determined to purify and transform the Church. The reforms that implemented, from the ban on homosexual unions to the expulsion of corrupt clerics and the change in the form of confession, showed leadership that did not hesitate to challenge the status quo. Leo XIV did not seek to please everyone, nor did I fear criticism. Its mission was clear: to restore the Church to its original mission and the purity of Christ's teachings. He became a leader who was not guided by political or social considerations, but for an unshakable commitment to the truth. His direct and unconnected approach made him seen for some as a savior of faith, and for others as an authoritarian and divisive figure. We got to the end, and if you got here, it's because something bigger has come together right now. The Spirit guided us to reflect on the direction of our faith, so no longer to follow what is passing, but we stand in eternal truths. Leave in the comments from where you are watching. This is not just a comment. It is a demonstration that even distant, We are all united by the same faith. If this content has touched your heart, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more stories that challenge, illuminate, and connect us as a community. Together we can continue to explore the transformations that faith can bring to our lives. Now I invite you to reflect on everything we have seen, remembering that sometimes the deepest changes begin with the most silent moments.